Pirates were dying of thirst surrounded by an endless ocean, until one crew discovered something so simple, so brilliant, that modern water companies are now paying millions to replicate it. But here's what's shocking. This wasn't some complex contraption, and the secret ingredient was literally floating right next to their ships. Picture this. You're floating on millions of gallons of water, yet dying of thirst. That was the daily reality for pirates sailing the seven seas. Makes sense, right? The ocean might as well have been a liquid desert when it came to finding something safe to drink. Pirates faced a brutal paradox. Water everywhere, but not a drop they could safely gulp down without risking their lives. Seawater would kill them faster than a Spanish galleon's cannons. Well, maybe not that fast, but you get the idea. These seafaring rogues had to be smarter than your average landlubber when it came to water. They couldn't exactly pull up to a Starbucks for bottled water. Instead, they hauled massive wooden barrels called casks onto their ships, each one holding precious rainwater like liquid gold. But here's where things got tricky. Fresh water doesn't stay fresh for long, especially when you're rocking around in a wooden tub for months at a time. Those barrels became breeding grounds for bacteria nastier than a pirate's table manners. One sip of contaminated water could leave even Blackbeard doubled over with dysentery or suffering from scurvy. And the weird part is, pirates actually became obsessed weather watchers. They'd study clouds like modern meteorologists because every rainstorm was a lifeline. When those dark clouds rolled in, the entire crew would spring into action, turning their massive sails into giant funnels to catch every precious drop. Running out of water before reaching the next port? That was every captain's nightmare. Pirates would rather face a naval battle than watch their water supplies dwindle to nothing. At least you could fight your way out of a sword fight, but dehydration? That enemy was invisible and relentless. The smartest crews learned to ration water like their lives depended on it because they literally did. A typical pirate needed at least a gallon of fresh water per day just to survive, and that's without factoring in the Caribbean heat or the physical demands of sailing. Then there's the fact that these guys were essentially floating around with time bombs. Contaminated water could wipe out an entire crew faster than enemy fire. Pirates who survived weren't just lucky with their raids, they were masters of water management. But here's what most people don't know about these seafaring survivors. They developed water purification techniques so advanced that modern science is still catching up. The methods they used weren't just clever, they were revolutionary. Pirates weren't just good at stealing treasure, they were absolute geniuses at making dirty water drinkable. And honestly, their methods would put some modern campers to shame. Here's what most people don't know. Those rough and tumble sea dogs created filtration systems that work better than anything you'd find in a medieval town. While landlubbers were drinking from the same rivers they dumped their waste in, pirates were engineering water so clean it could make a health inspector weep with joy. Their secret weapon? Layers. But not the kind your grandmother told you to wear in winter. Pirates would take a wooden barrel and create what I like to call the maritime lasagna of purification. First came a layer of coarse gravel at the bottom. This caught the big nasties floating around. Then sand, packed tight enough to make quicksand jealous. And here's the brilliant part. Charcoal on top. Now, before you think they were just randomly throwing barbecue leftovers into their water supply, understand this. Charcoal is nature's vacuum cleaner for toxins. These sailors figured out something that modern science confirms. Activated charcoal absorbs impurities like a gossip absorbs rumors. The whole setup looked rougher than a 3-day beard, but it worked like magic. Pour murky, suspicious-looking water through the top, and what came out the bottom was clearer than a pirate's conscience after finding buried treasure. But wait, there's a catch that would make even Blackbeard nervous. While this system could remove dirt, debris, and some nasty particles, it couldn't kill bacteria. That's like having a bouncer who stops troublemakers but lets pickpockets waltz right through the front door. Pirates knew this limitation, which is exactly why they had backup plans that would make survival experts today tip their hats. The really clever crews could assemble one of these filtration contraptions faster than you could say, "Shiver me timbers," usually within an hour of making landfall. They'd use whatever materials they could find, broken pottery, cloth scraps, even torn sails. Nothing went to waste when your life depended on clean water. And get this, archaeologists have found evidence of similar filtration systems on shipwrecks from the 1600s. These weren't desperate last-minute inventions. This was standard pirate engineering passed down through generations of seafaring rogues. Think your Brita filter is impressive? Well, pirates were doing the same job 3 centuries earlier with nothing but beach scraps and pure ingenuity. Of course, filtration was just the beginning of their water wizardry. Now, here's where things get interesting and a bit tipsy. Pirates didn't just drink rum because they loved a good party. Well, okay, they definitely loved a good party, but there was genuine survival science behind all that boozing. You see, rum wasn't just their liquid courage, it was their liquid lifesaver. When pirates mixed rum with their questionable water supplies, something magical happened. The alcohol actually killed off nasty bacteria that could turn a fierce sea dog into a seasick mess faster than you could say, yo ho ho. Makes sense, right? It's the same principle your grandmother used when she'd dab whiskey on a cut. Except pirates were doing it centuries before anyone understood why it worked. But here's the kicker. They had to get the mixture just right. Too little rum and the bacteria would throw their own party in your stomach. Too much rum and you'd be stumbling around the deck like you're still experiencing rough seas on calm waters. Not exactly ideal when you're trying to avoid walking the plank. The typical pirate ratio was roughly 1 part rum to 4 parts water. This wasn't some random guess either. Through trial and error, and probably plenty of hangovers, they discovered this sweet spot that kept them hydrated without keeping them hammered. And let's talk about Blackbeard for a second. This guy supposedly knocked back a gallon of rum daily. Now, before you think he was just the world's first professional drinker, remember that most of this was diluted with water. He wasn't stumbling around drunk as a skunk. He was actually practicing advanced water purification. Though I'm betting his morning breath could have scared off enemy ships all by itself. The genius part? This method worked exactly like modern antiseptics. While ship doctors were still bleeding patients to cure everything from headaches to broken legs, pirates were accidentally creating their own antibacterial solution. They were basically carrying liquid hand sanitizer 300 years before anyone knew what germs were. Well, the alcohol trick was brilliant, but it had one major flaw. You can't exactly grow rum on a ship. When supplies ran low, pirates needed something else to keep their crew healthy and their water safe. That's where they turned to nature's original medicine cabinet. And trust me, what they discovered would make your local health food store jealous. Scurvy was basically the grim reaper of the high seas. This nasty disease turned tough pirates into toothless, bleeding messes faster than you could say, walk the plank. But here's where our seafaring rogues got surprisingly smart about staying healthy. Lemons and limes weren't just garnishes for their rum, they were literal lifesavers. Pirates figured out centuries before doctors did that citrus fruits could kick scurvy's butt. While landlubbers were still scratching their heads about why sailors' teeth fell out, pirates were already loading up on vitamin C like it was treasure. The clever part? They treated citrus like liquid gold because, well, it basically was. A single lime could mean the difference between a functioning crew member and a guy whose gums looked like raw hamburger meat. Not exactly the look you're going for when trying to intimidate merchant ships, right? But storing fresh citrus on a wooden ship for months? That's trickier than convincing your spouse you need another fishing rod. These fruits spoiled faster than milk in August heat. Smart pirate crews developed rotation systems using the ripest fruit first and carefully monitoring their precious citrus supplies like modern-day inventory managers. Some enterprising pirates even learned to preserve citrus juice in sealed containers. They'd mix lime juice with a bit of rum, not just for flavor, but because the alcohol helped preserve the vitamin C longer. Talk about killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Their morning health shot packed more punch than today's expensive wellness drinks. Then there's the brilliant trading aspect. Pirates would specifically target ships carrying citrus cargo, not just for the immediate vitamin boost, but because they understood the long-term value. While other crews fought over gold and silver, the smartest pirates knew that a crate of fresh limes was worth more than jewels to a crew facing months at sea. The British Navy eventually caught on to this citrus secret, which is why British sailors became known as limeys. But pirates were using this life-saving hack decades earlier. They discovered that preventing disease was way more profitable than treating it, a lesson that would make modern healthcare executives weep with envy. Well, citrus was just one piece of their survival puzzle. The really ingenious part was how these seafaring scoundrels turned their entire spice collection into a floating pharmacy. The herbs and spices they carried weren't just making their hardtack taste less like cardboard. They were running a sophisticated natural medicine operation that would make today's health food stores jealous. Pirates weren't just rough sailors with terrible dental hygiene. They were basically floating pharmacists with a spice rack. While most people think herbs and spices were luxury items reserved for fancy dinners, these sea rogues knew something that would make modern health gurus jealous. Take rosemary, for instance. Pirates didn't carry it to make their hardtack taste like a five-star meal. This aromatic herb was their secret weapon against bacteria lurking in their water supplies. They'd drop a few sprigs into their barrels, and suddenly their sketchy water became slightly less likely to kill them. Not exactly a ringing endorsement, but hey, it worked. Then there's thyme, and no, that's not a typo. This little herb packed more antibacterial punch than a pirate's morning breath. Smart crews would stuff dried thyme into cloth pouches and let them steep in their water barrels like the world's most dangerous tea bags. The result? Water that tasted awful but wouldn't send you to Davy Jones's locker quite as quickly. But here's where pirates got really creative. They discovered that boiling water with a mixture of herbs created something resembling medicinal tea. Picture Blackbeard sipping herbal tea with his pinky up. Now that's comedy gold right there. The real genius was in their storage methods. Pirates learned to pack herbs in airtight barrels with layers of salt to prevent spoilage. This wasn't just smart, it was centuries ahead of modern food preservation techniques. These guys were basically running floating laboratories while dodging naval authorities and searching for buried treasure. Well, the herb game had its challenges too. Fresh herbs spoiled faster than a pirate's reputation in port towns. Dried herbs lasted longer, but lost potency over time. Kind of like how your grandmother's spice rack probably contains oregano from the Carter administration. Pirates also figured out that certain herb combinations worked better than others. Mixing sage with mint didn't just improve taste, it created a natural antiseptic cocktail that modern science now recognizes as genuinely effective. These seafaring outlaws stumbled onto principles that pharmaceutical companies spend millions researching today. The funniest part? Pirates were probably healthier than most landlubbers of their era, thanks to their accidental mastery of natural medicine. While city folks were drinking questionable well water, pirates were crafting herbal remedies that would make your local health food store proud. But even with all these herbal tricks up their sleeves, pirates still faced their biggest water challenge. The ocean surrounded them with water they couldn't drink, and sometimes desperate times called for truly desperate measures that would change everything. When you think about pirates boiling seawater, it sounds pretty crazy, right? Well, these ocean raiders figured out something that modern survival experts still use today, and it's worth its weight in gold. Here's the thing about boiling salt water. It actually works. The process is dead simple, but don't let that fool you. Pirates would heat seawater in large iron pots until steam rose up. Then they'd capture that steam and let it cool back into liquid. What you get is pure fresh water without a trace of salt. But here's where it gets interesting and a bit funny. Pirates weren't exactly known for their patience, yet this method required sitting around a fire for hours like they were cooking the world's most boring stew. One pirate captain supposedly called it watching water dance because the steam would twist and swirl before turning back into drinking water. The salt left behind wasn't wasted either. Pirates treated salt like liquid gold, and for good reason. They used it to preserve meat for months, cure wounds, and even as currency in some ports. Talk about getting your money's worth from seawater. Now the downside, this process ate through fuel faster than a teenager goes through pizza money. Pirates had to choose between using wood for cooking food or making fresh water. Many crews would only fire up the distillation process during emergencies or when they had plenty of driftwood to burn. The time factor was brutal too. Making just 1 gallon of fresh water could take 4 to 6 hours of constant boiling. That's like binge watching an entire season just to get enough water for one person for 2 days. Not exactly efficient by today's standards, but here's what's mind-blowing. Modern desalination plants use the exact same principle, just on a massive scale. These facilities provide fresh water to millions of people worldwide, generating billions in revenue annually. Pirates essentially invented the foundation of a multi-billion-dollar industry while sitting on wooden ships, probably complaining about the heat. The really clever crews figured out shortcuts. They'd use metal gun barrels as makeshift condensers or rig up cloth systems to catch more steam. Some even discovered that adding certain herbs during boiling could improve the taste, basically creating the world's first flavored distilled water. Looking back, it's pretty remarkable how these rough and tumble sailors mastered something so scientifically sound. Makes you wonder what other secrets they figured out during those long months at sea, doesn't it? But their smartest innovation wasn't just making water, it was how they stored it to keep it fresh for weeks. Storage might sound boring compared to sword fights and treasure hunting, but for pirates, keeping water fresh was literally the difference between striking it rich or becoming fish food. While landlubbers worried about wine cellars, these sea rogues had to master the art of preserving their most precious liquid cargo. The humble barrel became a pirate's best friend. Well, after their cutlass and maybe a good parrot. These weren't your average wine casks either. Pirates knew that a leaky barrel meant certain death, so they treated these wooden containers like million-dollar safes. They'd coat the inside with tar, beeswax, and sometimes even animal fat to create an airtight seal that would make modern Tupperware jealous. But here's where it gets clever. Pirates discovered that different woods affected water quality differently. Oak barrels, perfect for long voyages because they naturally resisted bacteria. Pine, terrible choice. Made water taste like Christmas tree soup and spoiled faster than a politician's promise. The smart crews would actually char the inside of their barrels lightly, creating a natural filtration system that worked better than anything you could buy at a medieval marketplace. Then there's the rotation system that would impress any modern logistics expert. Pirates never used just one barrel at a time. They'd number their casks and rotate through them systematically, always checking for signs of spoilage. A greenish tint? That barrel got tossed overboard faster than a mutinous crew member. The smell test was crucial too. If it smelled worse than the ship's cook after a 3-day drinking bender, it wasn't going in anyone's mouth. Well, the really ingenious pirates took storage one step further. They'd create false bottoms in barrels to hide emergency water reserves from both enemies and their own thirsty crew members. Some captains kept personal water stashes that only they knew about. Insurance policies for when things got desperate. The temperature control was another trick these seafaring survivalists mastered. They'd wrap barrels in wet cloth during hot days and bury them deep in the ship's coolest spots. This kept the water from turning into a bacterial playground that could kill faster than a Spanish galleon's cannons. Storage wasn't just about keeping water drinkable, it was about rationing liquid life itself. A well-organized water storage system could extend a crew's survival time by weeks, but even the most perfectly stored water couldn't solve every problem pirates faced on the endless blue desert. Sometimes they needed something far more revolutionary, a method so ingenious it would eventually inspire technology worth billions of dollars today. But here's where things get absolutely wild. The real million-dollar secret wasn't any of those clever tricks we just talked about. Nope. It was something so brilliant that modern engineers basically copied it word for word. Pirates figured out distillation. And I'm not talking about making moonshine, though knowing pirates, that probably came later. These salty sea dogs discovered they could turn endless ocean water into pure, drinkable H2O using nothing but heat and some makeshift equipment. Think your grandpa still in the basement was innovative? These guys were doing it 300 years earlier on rocking ships. Here's how their genius worked. They'd take a large cooking pot, usually stolen from some unfortunate merchant vessel, and fill it with seawater. Then they'd heat it up until steam started rising. But here's the clever part. They'd capture that steam using coiled metal tubes, gun barrels, or even hollowed-out bamboo if they were really desperate. When that steam cooled down in the tubes, it turned back into water. But not just any water, completely pure, salt-free, life-saving water. The whole setup looked like something a mad scientist would cook up. Picture Blackbeard hunched over a steaming contraption, probably cursing at the slow drip of precious fresh water. Makes you wonder if that's where the term pirate's brew really came from, right? Now get this. The same exact principle powers those massive desalination plants you see today. We're talking about billion-dollar facilities that supply entire cities with drinking water. Los Angeles, Sydney, Tel Aviv. They're all using pirate technology that's just gotten a fancy modern makeover. The irony is thicker than ship's biscuit. These rough and tumble outlaws, who most people thought were just drunken troublemakers, were actually pioneering water purification technology that wouldn't become mainstream for another 2 centuries. Sure, their version was slower than watching paint dry and about as reliable as a weather forecast. One broken tube or cracked pot meant back to drinking questionable rainwater mixed with rum. But when it worked, pure liquid gold. Every time you turn on your kitchen faucet or crack open a bottle of purified water, you're benefiting from innovations that started with desperate pirates trying not to die of thirst while surrounded by an undrinkable ocean. The real treasure wasn't buried on some remote island. It was floating right beneath their ships the entire time, just waiting for someone smart enough to figure out how to unlock it.